Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial, we'll be making this native shirt. If it's something you're interested in, then let's get started. For the front piece, I measured the length of my top. The length of my top is 31. Then I added 1 inch to it. After that, I went ahead to cut it out. I'll be cutting both the front and back together. I have placed my front on my back piece. On the back piece, I'll be adding 4 inches on it. The 4 inches is for the hem allowance and the shoulder slant. Once I'm done with that, I'll be cutting out my fabric. For the width, I use the highest circumference. Like my highest circumference I'll be using for this is 12. So I cut it on. For the shoulder slant, I went down by 2 inches. Then I'm going to slant it from there. After that, I'll cut it out. The next thing I'm going to do is to move the front to the back hem so that they will be equal. Then I'll go ahead to fold the back to the front like so, the back shoulder to the front so that they meet. Then I'll iron it. The next thing I'm going to do is to measure half of my shoulder measurement plus half an inch. For my armhole, I will also be using the measurement of my shoulder. Once I'm done with the shoulder and armhole measurements, I went ahead to measure quarter of my body, like my chest. I marked it. What I'm going to do is to get the midpoint of my armhole measurements. Then I went in by half an inch. Then I just connected them to get my armhole. To get my waist measurements, I went down by 7 inches for my body measurements. Then I marked a quarter of my waist measurements. From my hem, I went up by 2 inches. That will be for my turning allowance, like the folding of the hem. From the marked 2 inches, I'm going to go up by 6 inches. That will be for the slit opening. Then I'm going to measure the same measurements for my body to that slit opening. Then I'll add 2 inches for the folding of the slit opening. I hope you understand. After that, I went ahead to connect my points together. Then I cut out my fabric. Please follow the steps I use in cutting out so as not to make mistake. The next thing I'm going to do after this is to cut out my neck measurements. My round neck measurement is 16. I'll be cutting out 2.5 by 4.5. The width is 2.5, while the depth is 4.5. Then I'll just draw a curve to connect the points. Please follow the process I use in cutting out the neck so that you won't be cutting out the back pieces when you're just cutting out the front. As you notice, when I get to that folded part, I will lift up my front piece. So I'll just be cutting out the front piece there. Don't make a mistake by cutting out your back. I've gone ahead to give my front an opening. The length of the opening is 6 inches. For my back piece, I've gone ahead to cut out a facing. I just placed my back piece on the facing, then I cut it out. I have also gone ahead to give the facing a V shape. What I did was just to get the middle point. From that middle point, I'm going to slant it to the shoulder part. The next thing I'll do is to pin my facing on the right side of my back piece. Then I'm going to sew it down. When I'm done with that, I'll be joining my front and back shoulders together. I'll be placing my front piece in the middle of my back piece and the facing. Then I'll sew. Just follow how I did it. Once I'm done stitching, I went ahead to also top stitch the shoulder. You can see how the inside looks like. There's no sign that it was stitched together. What I'm going to do next is piping of the neckline. I've gone ahead to make like a bias form with my fabric, so that's what I'm going to use for my neck. I'm going to place it on my neckline and just sew around it. For my placket, I've cut out a bias form for the placket. Then I'm going to notch the ending of the opening a little bit so that when I sew, it will stop at the notch part. For the other placket, I'll be sewing it on the wrong side. Then I'll give it a notch at the ending of the opening to turn it to the front. I'll be showing you the sewing process. The first thing I did was to fold the bias. Then I placed it at the beginning of my neckline and I will be sewing till the notch part. Then I'll just cut out the excess fabric. For the other placket, I left half an inch before I placed my interfacing. The width of the placket is 1/4. I went ahead to press and fold like so, but I'll be doing a more detailed tutorial in my next video. I left half an inch sewing allowance on the outer part of the placket and I'll be sewing on the wrong side. When I'm done sewing to the notch part, I'm going to turn it to the right side. Then I will sew the plackets on the front piece like so. Once I get to the notch part, I'm going to trim a little bit of the inside fabric. I'll trim it to that notch part. After that, I'll continue sewing my fabric till I get to the end of the placket. I'm going to give it like a sharp arrow point, as you can see me during the video. Then I'm going to sew it down. Before I get to the notch points, I'll make sure the other placket is inside, like it's not showing on the wrong side, it's inside the placket before I will sew it down to the notch points. Then I'm just going to give it like a Z sign. It's not necessary, you can just stop at this point. It should look like this once you're done. The next thing I'm going to do is to cut out my sleeve. I'm going to measure my round armhole, which is 10. Then I'll fold my sleeve like so that I'll cut out both sleeves together. What I'll do is draw out an horizontal line for the beginning of my sleeve. Then I went ahead to measure the length of my sleeve, which was 10. And I added a sewing allowance, 2 inches sewing allowance. Once I'm done with that, I went ahead to measure my bicep measurement, which was 12, but I added 1 inch sewing allowance. Since my armhole is 10 inches, I'll make my sleeve opening 9.5. Then I will go down by 3 inches. Because when I draw out that sleeve curve, I will get 10 inches. What I'm doing here is making sure my sleeve is 10 inches. I'll go ahead to connect the lines. Then on my folding allowance, I'll mark my bicep measurement, but I'm going to add 3/4 of an inch so that when I fold the allowance, it will meet the bicep measurement. This is what I meant when I said it will meet the bicep measurement. If you don't cut it like that, you notice that the allowance won't reach that point. I'm going to stitch down my folding allowance. I'm just making sure my sleeve is the same as my armhole opening before going to my machine to stitch it down. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to connect my side and I'll be stopping my sewing 1 inch on that slit point. And I had to fold my slits like that, and also the hem folding allowance. Then I'm going to sew from that side. I'm going to sew like that continuously before I get to the other side. This is what my final project looks like. Once I'm done with that, I'm just going to add a press button to the neck area. I love the fact that it looks smart on me. It's not too tight and it's not too big. Thank you for watching. See you in my next one. Bye. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel.